You can almost feel it immediately when you go into a community. It's the energy. Where are we feeling it? Where's it coming from? And if we have people moving about, we have programming going on, activities going on, people asking questions, there's this feeling of hospitality. People coming up to you and saying hello and being friendly and outgoing. I think that is the edge that some communities have over others.
Most communities try to market their way into occupancy. This week's guest believes the real lever isn't the ad budget or the tour script, it's the lived experience inside the building and the leadership discipline behind it.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, founder of CCR Growth, the only demand generation agency that is exclusive to the senior living industry. And through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. All right, today's guest is Dr. Leslie K. Eldridge, a senior living operator and organizational leadership professional with roughly 35 years in housing for older adults. She holds a doctorate of management in organizational leadership and currently serves as senior director of operations at Ascension Living, overseeing operations across the housing side of the organization, including life enrichment, memory support, and sales. Dr. Leslie's perspective is simple and rare. Occupancy is not just a sales outcome. It's the downstream result of leadership consistency, operational clarity, and a community experience that helps people feel like they're choosing a better life, not just a safer one. So, Dr. Leslie, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me, Jerry. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. This is an interesting conversation. I love when we can talk about leadership and operations. I want to first talk about, I also think it's interesting too that we're framing this as like it's not a marketing problem. It's more of a leadership challenge, only because I'm in marketing. So I always love to have these conversations. Right? Yeah. But I want to talk first about what it is we're actually selling in senior living, because families don't fall in love with policies or marketing per se. They fall in love with the picture of daily life, but that life inside the community, it's kind of like the core value proposition, and it's not about an activities calendar. And so like when you say life is the key, what are you really pointing to that most operators miss?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we are missing in general is look, clinical is extremely important, and it's regulatory, right? And so everything kind of leans in that direction. But if we really sit back and think about it, that's one piece of the entire life, right? And so we have to look at an individual holistically, right? There are many other aspects to life in general that you and I do every single day, right? And so we have to take that into consideration when we're talking to families and to possibly the resident themselves, depending on the circumstances, right? And, I think families kind of lean towards a little more clinical because they want their family member, their loved one to be well cared for. But in the scheme of it, once they get into a community, it's more about the life, right? How we every single day live, just like you and I.
I've been in marketing for almost 3 decades, and through my agency, I've helped some of the largest senior living providers attract qualified leads and fill rooms faster while lowering their acquisition costs. But one thing kept bothering me. While working with larger communities, I kept meeting smaller operators, 10 to 50 bed communities that were struggling to compete with the big box providers because they don't have the same budget, staffing, or support behind them. And as a small business owner myself, I get that. You're wearing 5 different hats, you're trying to fill rooms while still giving great care, and that's exactly why we built Growthly. Growthly takes everything we've learned from helping large operators fill their buildings and makes it accessible to smaller communities without retainers, without long-term contracts or inflated costs. It's a performance-based partnership, and you only pay when we deliver move-ins. We help you stand out online, stop depending on referral agencies, bring in qualified families, and fill your community faster. Growthly is built for your small community and designed for big results. Learn more at growthlyseniorliving.com. What does it look like operationally to treat care as a piece without letting it take over the culture?
Yeah, I think, we have to educate the entire team, right? And I think from top down, right? Because we
Hmm.
lean in that direction and we have to. There's no question about it, right? It's regulatory. People have to get their medications, they have to be well cared for and those kinds of things. But I think if we start looking at someone holistically and we start breaking it down and saying, gosh, if this particular person was more engaged in lifelike activities, spiritually, socially, educationally, all of those things, we'll probably see a decline in the need for those clinical interventions because people are bored or behaviors come out, especially in memory support individuals who they can't express what their needs are, right? But we can see that if we provide all these other parts of life, those behaviors go down, right? Life goes up.
Yeah, no, I love that. What would you say are the earliest signs that life is strong in a community, even before occupancy numbers move?
One of the things that I look at when I go into a community, because you can almost feel it immediately when you go into a community, and it's the energy. I'm always talking about energy. Where are we feeling it? Where's it coming from? And if we have people moving about, we have programming going on, activities going on, people asking questions. There's a hustle and a bustle a little bit about it, I think. And, we certainly don't want that all the time because that's not life either. But there's this feeling of hospitality, people coming up to you and saying hello and being friendly and outgoing a little bit. And I think that is the edge that some communities have over others.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. That initial experience is huge. So, talking a little bit about where we have the silver tsunami that's upon us or almost upon us. We're looking at supply shortage during a demand wave, essentially. So you've got occupancy numbers increasing while development is decreasing across the industry. I saw a data point that said something like we're at like 37% of what we need to be building right now. I think they said by 2030 we need like an additional 900,000 units or something like that, and we've only done so far like 300,000. So we're woefully behind, and clearly we've got to kind of rethink how we're thinking about occupancy and thinking about just senior living in general. What are you seeing on the ground that tells you the supply story is changing? Is it changing, or is that just kind of like a myth that's out there?
No, I think it's real, although I would say that, baby boomers specifically, they're not looking to go into a community necessarily, right? And I do think that although we're not necessarily building new communities, I think the ones that we have, they're need driven whether we like it or not, right? Even in independent living, there's something going on that they can't live in a single family home or wherever they are,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And I do think that there's going to be a rise of those neighborhoods, single family neighborhoods, because all of those people are aging in place where they are, and services and those kinds of things are going to come into those little pockets, right? Think of a cul-de-sac, right? And you have this little circle of single family homes, and they're all upwards of in their late 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, and they're going to need services. And I think, bringing in those services to help them engage in life, making sure they're well cared for, they have food and the necessities, right? And maybe even at that point, being able to find additional supportive resources for them, whether
Hmm.
it's in a IL or an AL or even a memory support.
And why do you think boomers are waiting longer? I mean, obviously life expectancy, we're living longer, healthier lives, but then when people tend to go into senior living now, they're going in with higher acuity, so they're not necessarily getting to enjoy and reap the benefits of how senior living is kind of set up right now with all the features and amenities and activities that are kind of geared more towards the independent living side of things. What is my question that I'm trying to ask here? I guess it's why is this generation different? Like, what's changed with the boomers that previous generations obviously, they were coming in sooner because they weren't living as long, but besides the life expectancy piece, what else is there that's motivating them to want to stay home and not to move into more of a community-based setting?
Well, I'm not sure, the thought process has really changed.
Yeah.
You don't wake up one morning and go, "Look, let's go look for senior housing today," right? And then move into it, right? I think that's always on people's minds. Something has probably happened to them that they start thinking about it. But, these years thinking about how do we get better at this, right? And I do think it's elevating those programs and activities that are more adult like, and I hate to say it like that, but I think more sophisticated type programming. People aren't going to come and look. We're never probably going to get rid of the bingo, but at the end of the day, I think people are looking for a high level of independence regardless of where they are on the care side, right? And I think you've got to be able to provide those. And I don't know that we do enough of those types of things. One. And two, I don't think we market ourselves well.
Now, are there, I guess, from an operational perspective, I mean, let's just say development stays constrained, it doesn't increase at all, even though we can clearly see there's a major demand for it. What operational disciplines would separate the communities that stabilize from the ones that stall, do you think?
Yeah, I think they're, going to have to keep up with the times, right? And trying to figure out internally when you don't have a lot of wiggle room necessarily on the dollars to be able to do upgrades or changes physically to your community. So you have to be creative, right? In finding ways to I don't know, create a bistro or multiple dining experiences within the constraints that you have physically as a physical plant, right? So I think they're going to have to be a little forward thinking and how can we do that even, building's 30 years old. We didn't have those spaces when it was built. So how do we create those? Either it's an illusion or they find spaces that relatively inexpensive to transform.
Yeah. And and from the leadership side of things too, I think as kind of like the screws get tightened a little bit on leadership because they're having to do more with less. I think we're seeing more turnover at the top now versus just at the like the caregiver level. And I see this a lot. I mean, we work with communities all over the country in 24 states right now. And we'll see like situations where there's been like 3 EDs in the last 6 months. What's sitting underneath that? What's driving that situation? Is it hiring? Is it support expectations? Is there something else going on that's causing them to pick up and leave so quickly?
Opening as an executive director, it's the urge to just hire is strong, right? Because, it's the leadership that drives the entire community and business. And I think finding the right talent out there is extremely tough. And I think sometimes we look for those with experience in senior housing when maybe we shouldn't, right? Maybe we should go outside of the industry and look for leaders who know how to drive a business, right? Have a background in sales and know what it takes to get to the next level. And then, we're looking for heart, right? And if we have someone who has the heart, but then has that experience or that talent, why not? We could train some of these other things. But if we don't get specific about our leadership and who they are, I don't know that they're gonna be successful in this business because you're responsible for lives, right? And you're responsible for so many things in a community.
It's a lot of pressure for sure. I mean, are within your organization, have you found that there's certain hiring or retention strategies that have been more successful than in the past?
I think slowing on the hiring side, let's say, I think you slow the pace, right? And, I'm currently in that kind of a situation. And luckily for me, I found an interim executive director so I can slow the process. And she's doing a great job. And so now I can really take my time and find the right person that's culturally right, that has the talent, and that really wants to dig in and do this. Um, I think on that side is slow down, right?
Yeah.
And really, in the day of Teams or Zoom or whatever platform you have, we do everything virtually, it feels like now. And so you're talking to people virtually and then you go ahead and hire them. And it's like, well, no, I think we have to really meet in person because
To
there's
be in the
so
same
many
space just
more
a little bit. Yeah.
dynamics when you're talking to someone
Yeah.
face to face. And
Right.
I think a lot of times we're just doing it virtually, and that's probably a mistake. And then I think retention is, caring for people and supporting them. And it is stressful. And they have I do, I have high expectations, right? We're taking care of people. And so you should have high expectations. And I think, just really helping them strategize and help support putting those strategies in place and follow up with all of those kinds of things. And, I think we bring clarity to the picture, right? And I think clarity is kind, right? You be honest and clear with what we're expecting. And then I think consistency is key in how you operate every single day, how you market it, how you run a business,
Mhm.
and then I think you build connection, trust, and help them be successful.
You're in a unique position because you're in a director slash like support role for operations across multiple buildings.
Yes.
What are your non-negotiables for stabilizing leadership behaviors? I mean, is it consistency? Is that the biggest thing that you find success with, or is there something else?
I think connection, you gotta build trust and, trust can be broken so quickly and then it takes so long to build it back. And I think, doing the right things for the right reasons when no one's looking, right? And so I think connection is probably number one. And, how do you get to that? Well, probably you're clear and you're consistent with how you talk to people, how you build those relationships with people, and how you operate a community.
How do you build trust within a community? I feel like that's especially somebody new coming in and even like somebody coming into like a ED role. It takes a while to build trust in most situations, but I mean, it's such a fast-paced environment. There's so many moving parts. How do you accomplish that?
Yeah, especially when, if a community has lost trust or it's a turnover situation where there's multiple turnovers and then they're like, well, you're just going to stick around for, 5 minutes and then you're going to be gone. So now what? I think it's you got to pace yourself, right? You can't change things overnight. And I think it's starting with leader number one, right? And having a one-on-one conversation and understanding the community and then finding those commonalities of mistrust, I guess, or maybe there's a process that's not working right and just fixing it, right? Making it right. And then doing that over and over again and keeping the communication going consistently, right? People just want to know, why are we doing this? And once we tell them, they go, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so it's a process and you do it with one person at a time.
Yeah, that's true. For the culture piece of this too, I don't know. I'm not sure. Did you say this? Did you say you can't culture your way out of math? Or was that someone else that I
That
spoke
was
with?
somebody else, but I
Okay.
like it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting right now because you hear so often I don't know if excuse is the right word, but a lot of frontline workers will just say because of workforce constraints, they're not able to provide the care that is expected of them. What parts of the operating model have to change when staffing is tight? I mean, I feel like that's happening more and more without lowering dignity or safety of the residents.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge challenge that we have, right? And I don't know that there's an easy answer to that, honestly. I think if your leadership is really strong and you have a strong leadership team, sometimes it's all hands on deck. And I think you have to assess your your areas, right? So if you're in memory support, for example, how if you're challenged with staffing and you're seeing some burnout, jumping in and helping out and really understanding the environment. Because if you do that, then you can problem solve it, right? You can back out of that. Because my expectation as a leader, what we do it every day, all day, is problem solve, right? How are
Hmm.
we going to make this better? And you can't do that without maybe experiencing it firsthand and listening to what's going on. And if we're putting things in place, as I mentioned earlier on in this conversation, are we meeting unmet needs, right? And if we look at that, maybe the caregiving part will not be as strenuous.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And so you were talking earlier about excellence, right? And having a specific standard of excellence. How do you motivate people to maintain that level of excellence when the work is heavy and the pace never really seems to slow, especially in, like, say, a memory care environment?
Yeah, I think it's trust, right? Your trust, you communicate, right? Train, you communicate, you share your expectations, and then you trust people to do that. And then you verify, right? Can't be in an office all day. You've got to be out and exploring and visiting and checking and then retraining if necessary, or coaching up or coaching out, right? And I think you have to be present in order to share expectations and those high standards you're asking for.
And going back to the family a little bit, I think you and I would probably agree that the experience is what's winning the decision now more than amenities and more than anything else that the community has to offer. Families, they often kind of start this process thinking they're comparing price and care, but in reality they're comparing what life will feel like. What are the specific experience moments you believe operators should engineer on purpose?
First impressions go a long way, right? And so, you have to start with where do they get their information and what does that look and feel like? Was it a website? Was it a phone call? Did they call the community? All of those things are first impressions. Are we putting things, Facebook, let's be honest, is one of the main things that we do. And, creating that environment because we're pushing people to go look at that. Well, if we're doing that and we don't have anything there to share what life is like, then it's it's meaningless, right? And so I think we start at first impressions from the minute you drive in the driveway to you walk in the door and meet the concierge receptionist, whatever you call them, and what that is like every single step of the way and getting to know people personally, right? So if it's the salesperson, then discovering more personal things about them and what their hot buttons are. And then when they get to the community, you give them a big wow because you listened to what their story was.
When it comes to that tour experience too, I mean, is there a methodology that you've found successful to align sales operations and life enrichment so that I find that sometimes the tour experience doesn't necessarily match the reality in the day-to-day life of the community? Is there a way that you found success in that, in kind of aligning all those different pieces?
Well, first and foremost, I think if your life enrichment is poor, you need to make it better, right? Because if you win that resident over and your life enrichment isn't what you said it was, then we're in trouble there. But I think sometimes, if you think about life and how your day goes, well, sometimes it's quiet And, lo and behold, the prospect walks in right at the lull, right? And so I think you sometimes have to just create it so that people understand what life is like. Or share your Facebook, share a video, create a video. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can share the clarity of what life in a community might be. And there's downtime from time to time, just like you and me. We have quiet moments.
For sure. Should communities minimize when they do tours just based on the activity that's happening in the community?
No, I
No.
would say no, never. I think we accommodate that. People, it's a busy world. And when you find that opening that you have to go and do the tour or investigate this situation, you're probably limited. I know that from experience. And so I have a window of opportunity and that's it. And if you're not willing to see me, then I'm moving on to the next
Hmm.
community because I don't have time for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think too. And like the case of memory support, that's definitely it's an exigent circumstance. They need to find answers and figure out a lot of things very, very quickly. So those stakes are definitely rising in that space. And I know just speaking about memory support in general, the demand's growing. I mean, more and more people are being diagnosed with dementia at younger ages now. So that kind of that margin for the same old programming, it's shrinking. It's shrinking. Communities, they need leadership and engagement strategies that respect the identity, autonomy, and safety of the residents. So, what does life look like inside memory support when it's done well and not just managed?
Yeah, I think there's a rhythm of the day, right? Repetition is key. It's every day is the day that I want to try to recall, right? And so having those routines, I think is extremely important. And then I think individualized, right? So if Mary has dementia and she worked the overnight shift, right? Her day is different than other people. And so making that work so that she can recall how her day may have been. And then I think having individualized, call it jobs or chores or whatever throughout the day that residents are responsible for, especially in memory support, because that's routine. They're used to
Yeah.
that. They did that at home. And
Yep.
so they remember those things. And so that makes them feel better about how they're going through their day. And so I think a rhythm of a day in the life of a person.
How do you coach teams to see the person first when the days get hard? I know, like, we're always telling people to treat the person, not the diagnosis, but I feel like it probably is difficult sometimes just because they're seeing similar patterns and behaviors and Uh, I mean, just the toll that that would take on on a caregiver, I can't imagine day in and day out.
Yeah, I think life stories, right? Getting those on the front end of someone moving into your community and, identifying all those things about a person and then using that tool, right? And communicating it to the team, having huddles and talking about those individuals and, once they move in, when you're in your huddle, talk about them, right? If they're exhibiting, any kind of behavior or they seem to be bored or anything like that, grab that life story, pull that back up. And I think again, I'm going to go back to consistency. As a leader, it's consistency, right? Going back to it. Now go back to it again, right? And sometimes we just have to do that, repeat ourselves so that we get a culture that understands that this is how we help people. When it's all said and done, everyday decisions go right back to who we're serving today.
Yeah. Something you said last time too. I think the last kind of segment I want to talk to you about is just the message to operational leaders. And you said, I think your message last time was don't give up. What does don't give up look like in practice when you're leading a team inside a real building that has real constraints?
Yeah, it's not easy. Your first instinct is to flee, right? Run for the hills because it's hard sometimes, right? If everyone's working against it, right? You have an idea, you're support center, corporate office, whatever you call it, and then your teams, there it's a push-pull kind of thing. And I think if we go back to, and I'll just say it again, if we go back to why are we here? What is our purpose? And take a step back and say, this is important. I think it's important. This is enhancing the life of an individual or community. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep asking the question. I'm going to be the squeaky wheel, if you will, and just keep pushing through because it's important. And, I think about my own life, right? Someday. And I want people to be able to say, I'm going to keep going because it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would someone, I mean, we're in a situation now. I feel like there's definitely far fewer leaders in this space than there should be. So I feel like people could probably write their own ticket. And what would motivate them to stay in a situation like that if there's constraints when they know they can go somewhere else where there's not? I mean, why tough it out?
Yeah. I think at some point, you may not be able to, right? If you've given it everything you've got and you feel like you've tried your hardest and asked the next person, it's probably time to move on because you're not going to get anywhere, right? And that's a shame. That makes me sad. And there's organizations like that out there that don't hear, don't listen. My guess is eventually they're not going to be around because you can't keep doing that.
What do you want an executive director to do differently the next morning if they were listening to this episode and they woke up tomorrow? What would you want them to do differently than they did today?
Guess my first thought popped into my head was I love strategy, right? And I think your strategy is your purpose, right?
Hmm.
Why you do what you do, why you're in this business. Put goals in place, right, to get to the next level. Always trying to get to the next level, right? And I think you'll go so much further when you set goals, you follow those goals, stick to the plan, execute on the plan, pivot when necessary, and I truly believe that is success.
I love that. I love that. I am a big fan of strategy myself. Dr. Leslie, thank you so much for such a great conversation. Where can our audience go to learn more about Ascension Living or connect with you directly?
Yeah, ascensionliving.org. And my email is leslie.eldridge, the number 2, at ascension.org. Love to hear from you. And thank you so
Thank you.
much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a huge thank you to Dr. Leslie K. Eldridge for joining us and sharing what operational leadership really looks like when you care about both results and human experience. From life enrichment as a growth lever to leadership consistency as the foundation of trust, Leslie brought a clear message. If you want more families to say yes, you have to build a community worth choosing. If you want to connect with Dr. Leslie or learn more about her work at Ascension Living, we've included the relevant links in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care, covering everything from care models and leadership strategies to family support technology and the future of aging. Also, remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes, you can subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, founder of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, and please like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention, and until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again. Thanks, Dr. Leslie.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.